$3 million vanished overnight, leaving a resilient black woman's heart-wrenching cries echoing through the cold halls of the Springfield courthouse. But what earth-shattering secret could bring an entire city to its knees? Who was the mastermind behind this scheme, and why was she chosen as a pawn in this deadly game of power? Maya Johnson stepped out of the office building into a crisp autumn afternoon, the golden sunlight casting a warm glow over the brick-paved streets of downtown Springfield. She took a deep breath, savoring the cool air filling her lungs. Today was a monumental day. After months of tireless work, the charity she managed had finally secured a multi-million-dollar grant from a major investment fund. This wasn't just a financial victory. It was proof of her dedication and skill in managing resources and expanding the organization's impact. With this funding, thousands of underprivileged children would have access to education, healthcare, and the chance for a brighter future. Back at the office, the atmosphere was electric. Cheers erupted as she stepped into the conference room where her colleagues had gathered to celebrate. Richard Holloway, the organization's director, a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, personally poured her a glass of wine. "Maya, you are the heart and soul of this organization. Without you, we wouldn't have come this far," he said, his voice filled with pride. One by one, her coworkers raised their glasses, their faces beaming with joy. A few patted her shoulder, offering heartfelt congratulations. Maya smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. The media didn't miss the opportunity to highlight this achievement. The Springfield Times, one of the city's largest newspapers, ran a feature calling Maya Springfield's pride, a brilliant, dedicated woman whose commitment to philanthropy was changing lives. Photos of her with the children her organization had helped flooded news websites, and the comment sections overflowed with admiration from the community. To many, she was a symbol of kindness and selfless dedication. But Maya was more than just a brilliant financial manager. She had a heart of gold. She spent much of her time working directly in community centers, personally engaging in projects to support disadvantaged children. The kids adored her, running up to hug her whenever she arrived, excitedly sharing stories about their day. Once, an 8-year-old girl named Lily had told her, "I want to grow up to be like you and help lots of people." The words had touched her deeply, strengthening her resolve to continue down the path she had chosen. From the outside, Maya seemed to have it all: a dream job, the respect of her peers, the love of her community, and a reputation that was only growing. But beneath the surface, a quiet unease lingered. No matter how successful her organization became or how many people surrounded her with admiration, something in her gut told her this peace wouldn't last forever. That night, as she returned to her apartment, she sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. Her phone buzzed nonstop with congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. She had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, the perfect life she had built would come crashing down, and she would be thrown into the worst nightmare of her life. The piercing ring of Maya's phone shattered the silence of the night, yanking her out of a deep sleep. Her heart pounded as she fumbled blindly on the nightstand, fingers finally closing around the vibrating device. The screen's harsh glow illuminated the darkness. An unknown number, but the bank's name flashed at the top. A call from the bank at this hour? A cold knot of unease twisted in her stomach. With a deep breath, she swiped to answer. "Miss Johnson?" A solemn voice spoke on the other end. "I'm calling from the fraud department. Our system has detected a series of unusual, high-value transactions from your organization's account within the past hour. The total amount withdrawn is $3 million. The words barely registered. $3 million? For a moment, Maya felt as if the ground beneath her had disappeared. Her breath caught in her throat as a rush of adrenaline sent her fully upright in bed. "That's impossible," she stammered, clutching the phone tighter. I didn't authorize any transactions. There must be a mistake." "I'm afraid not, ma'am." The banker's tone remained professional but carried an unmistakable urgency. "The funds were dispersed to multiple accounts in rapid succession. We've taken immediate action and frozen the remaining balance, but the transactions have already gone through." Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. $3 million gone. The entire fortune meant to provide education, health care, and a future for thousands of underprivileged children had been stolen, vanished into thin air. She sprang out of bed, nearly tripping over the edge of her blanket as she grabbed her coat. Her hands trembled as she stuffed her phone into her pocket. There was no time to waste. She needed to get to the office, pull the financial reports, and trace the transactions herself. There had to be an explanation. There had to be a way to fix this. Her fingers shook as she tried dialing Richard Holloway, the organization's director, her mentor, the man who had believed in her from the start. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her anxiety deepened. Richard was never unreachable. Something was very, very wrong. The night air was sharp against her skin as she rushed outside and hailed the first taxi she could find. Springfield Community Foundation, downtown. She ordered breathlessly, slamming the door behind her. As the taxi sped through the empty streets, her mind raced with questions. Who could have done this? The financial security system was airtight. Only she and Richard had the authority to approve major transfers. There were protocols in place, including multi-step verifications and digital locks. It was nearly impossible for an external breach to happen unnoticed. Was this a cyber attack? A coordinated heist? Or worse, had someone inside the organization betrayed her? A terrifying thought struck her. What if she was being framed? She refused to believe it. But the unease that had lingered in the back of her mind for months now roared to life. As the taxi screeched to a halt in front of her office building, Maya barely waited for the car to stop before jumping out. She sprinted toward the entrance, her heels clacking against the pavement, fueled by urgency. But the moment she stepped inside the lobby, she was met with an unsettling sight. 2 security guards blocking the entrance. A sinking feeling gripped her. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward. "Miss Johnson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Maya blinked in disbelief. "What? She tried to step past him, but he didn't budge. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not authorized to enter." "Not authorized?" Her stomach twisted. "I'm the financial director. I need access to the system immediately. This is an emergency. Millions of dollars have been stolen." Her voice rose with desperation, but the guards remained unfazed. Then the second guard, an older man with a weary look, handed her a sealed envelope. "We've been given instructions to deliver this to you." Maya's fingers trembled as she tore open the envelope. She scanned the words, her breath catching with every line. "Effective immediately. You have been placed on indefinite suspension pending investigation into the recent financial discrepancies. This decision has been made by the board of directors." Her head spun. Indefinite suspension? Investigation? They were blaming her. "This is a mistake," she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "I had nothing to do with this." "Who approved this decision?" Neither guard responded. They were just following orders. Maya's blood turned cold. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a setup. Someone had orchestrated every detail, perfectly timed to trap her, to strip her of power before she even had a chance to fight back. The theft, the board's decision, and Richard's sudden radio silence indicated this wasn't random. Someone had been waiting for the right moment, and now her world was crumbling right in front of her. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Another unknown number. Her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitant, before she finally answered. "Miss Johnson," a crisp, detached voice spoke. "I'm with the Springfield Times. We're running a feature on your suspension. Would you care to comment on the allegations of embezzling $3 million? The breath left her body. The press already knew? Maya felt as though she had been plunged into ice water. She started, but no words followed. The reporter didn't wait. "The board released a statement earlier this morning. Richard Holloway has given us an exclusive interview. He referred to you as a disgrace to the organization. Do you have a response?" Maya's chest tightened. Richard? The man who had built this organization with her, who had once called her the heart and soul of the foundation. Had he turned on her too? Desperate, she yanked out her phone and searched her name. The headline screamed at her, Maya Johnson, from philanthropic angel to fraudulent thief. A charity icon exposed, stole millions from helpless children. Financial director caught in devastating embezzlement scandal. She scrolled to the comment section. Hundreds of people she had dedicated her life to helping, were condemning her, calling her a liar, a thief, a monster. Just yesterday, they had called her an inspiration. Now they wanted her in prison. Her fingers shook as she tried calling Richard. No answer. She tried again, straight to voicemail. She tried a third time. This time, a message popped up. Maya, I can't help you. Don't contact me again. Maya stared at the screen, her mind blank. Everything she had built, everything she had poured her life into, was gone. They weren't just accusing her, they were erasing her. And the worst part? She had no idea who had orchestrated this or why they wanted her destroyed. Her phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Her entire body tensed as she answered. This time, the voice was not that of a reporter. It was deep, deliberate, and chillingly calm. Now you understand, the voice said. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Everything you built was never really yours. And now it's gone. A sharp static filled the line before the call disconnected. Maya's hand trembled as she lowered the phone, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would crack through her ribs. Whoever this was, they weren't just a nameless enemy hiding behind corporate bureaucracy. This was personal. Someone had been watching, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She was alone, and the most terrifying part was that she had no idea who had orchestrated this or why they wanted to destroy her. But one thing was clear. Whoever was behind this had planned every move with precision, and this was only the beginning. 3 days. Just 3 days after her world collapsed, Maya was dragged before the court. No time to prepare, no chance to gather evidence, not even the opportunity to properly defend herself. Everything moved too fast, too ruthlessly, as if it had all been orchestrated from the start. She sat frozen in the defendant's chair, her icy hands gripping the edge of the table, struggling to steady her breath as she took in the packed courtroom. The harsh glare of reporters' cameras burned her eyes. All around, she could hear the murmurs, the whispers, mockery, ridicule from the very people who once cheered for her. The heavy doors at the front swung open, and a woman stepped inside, Judge Evelyn Harper. The moment she entered, a chilling air swept through the room. Her face was as cold as stone, her sharp eyes scanning Maya with nothing but contempt. Harper was no stranger to Springfield's judicial system. She was infamous for her strict, unforgiving rulings, particularly against those accused of fraud or embezzlement. But what sent an even deeper chill down Maya's spine was the look in her eyes. Not the impartial gaze of a judge, but the cold certainty of someone who had already decided the verdict. Harper took her seat at the high bench, lifted the gavel, and struck it down hard against the desk. The trial has begun. Her voice rang out, sharp, emotionless. The case of Maya Johnson, charged with embezzling $3 million from the Springfield charity organization, is now in session. No introductions, no chance for Maya to speak. At that moment, she understood. This wasn't just a fight for her innocence. This was a battle against an entire system that had already condemned her the moment she walked through those doors. Maya barely had time to steady herself before the prosecutor, Laura Mitchell, rose to her feet. Her face radiated confidence, sharp, unyielding. She strode toward the jury, each movement deliberate, her gaze sweeping across the room as if she had already won. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitchell's voice rang out, laced with disdain. Today we bear witness to one of the most shameless frauds in Springfield's history. A woman once trusted, once celebrated as the pride of the city. But beneath that polished image, she is nothing more than a thief. She turned abruptly toward Maya, her eyes burning with fury, as if she could set her ablaze right there in the courtroom. She didn't just betray the community trust. She stole from innocent children. A ripple of outrage spread through the courtroom. Mutters turned into murmurs, then into loud, accusatory whispers. Faces twisted in disgust, eyes filled with scorn, locked onto Maya. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, suffocating her, as if they were ready to condemn her on the spot. Truth be damned. Gritting her teeth, Maya gripped the chair's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I didn't do this," she said, her voice steady but brimming with frustration. "I didn't embezzle that money. Something isn't right." "Miss Johnson," Judge Harper's voice cut through the air like a blade. She slammed her gavel against the bench. "You will only answer direct questions. This is not a platform for your personal statements." Maya's eyes snapped toward her, disbelief flashing across her face. She hadn't even finished, she hadn't even defended herself, but already she had been silenced. Meanwhile, Mitchell was back at her table, flipping swiftly through a stack of documents. Let me rephrase, she said, her tone razor-sharp. Miss Johnson, is it true that you had full access to the organization's accounts? Maya clenched her fist. Yes, but... So you acknowledge that you had the authority to process transactions without requiring anyone else's approval? I never did that. Maya shot back, anger rising in her voice. Someone else. Yes or no, Miss Johnson? Harper's voice cracked through the tension once more, sharp with impatience. Maya bit her lip, forcing herself to stay composed even as fury roiled inside her. This was a setup, a carefully laid trap where every answer she gave would be twisted against her. They didn't want the truth, they wanted a scapegoat, and she was the perfect pawn in their game. Maya sat in the defendant's chair, her fingers gripping the armrests so tightly that her nails nearly dug into her skin. In front of her, Prosecutor Laura Mitchell continued to unveil a relentless stream of evidence. Bank statements, suspicious transactions, documents Maya had never seen before, all piling up like a predetermined verdict. Her attorney, Daniel Brooks, stood up, his voice firm yet laced with frustration. Your Honor, the defendant has not had the opportunity to review these materials. We request additional time to analyze them before proceeding with arguments. Judge Harper's expression remained impassive, her lips pressed into a thin, unforgiving line. Request denied, she said sharply, striking her gavel against the bench. This court has no room for delays. The defendant must answer now. Daniel turned to Maya, frustration and helplessness evident in his eyes. He took a deep breath, trying to contain his anger, but even he must have realized this was nothing more than a stage performance. Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. She was alone, completely and utterly alone. She scanned the courtroom, searching for a familiar, sympathetic face among the audience's former colleagues, old friends, anyone who might still believe in her. But all she found were cold stares, scornful glances, and whispered ridicule. Some people murmured among themselves, while others simply watched her with detached pity, as if she were some cornered animal with nowhere left to run. Mitchell took another step forward, her voice laced with mockery. Miss Johnson, are you still denying your involvement despite the overwhelming evidence? I didn't do this, Maya said, keeping her voice as steady as she could. I never made those transactions. Mitchell let out a dry, contemptuous laugh. How fascinating, she said, turning toward the jury. An intelligent woman with full access to the organization's financial accounts. And yet somehow she has no idea $3 million vanished under her name. She emphasized each word, letting the accusation hang in the air, igniting another wave of murmurs throughout the courtroom. Maya felt her blood boiling beneath her skin. She was trapped, humiliated, publicly torn apart before hundreds of people with no way to fight back. She wanted to scream, to stand up and demand to know if even a single person in this room actually believed her, but she already knew the answer. They had already made up their minds. She turned to Daniel, hoping for a sliver of reassurance, but his face mirrored the same helplessness she felt. He wanted to defend her, he was trying, but every path had been blocked, every door slammed shut. Maya took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. If they wanted to tear her down, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. They could try to drown her, but she refused to go down in silence. Maya sat motionless in the dimly lit holding cell, the weight of the trial still pressing down on her like an iron vice. Her mind reeled with unanswered questions, each one more suffocating than the last. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was innocent. She had never stolen a single cent, never authorized those transactions, never even considered doing something that could jeopardize the charity she had devoted years of her life to. And yet, the evidence against her had been airtight, damning, and relentless. If she hadn't done it, then who had? And perhaps the more terrifying question, why had they gone to such brutal lengths to destroy her? The image of Prosecutor Laura Mitchell tossing a stack of financial statements onto the courtroom table replayed in her mind. The papers fanned out like execution orders. Maya had barely been given a chance to review them, but even in the brief moments she had, something had stood out. The transactions had not come from her personal accounts. The money had moved through a network of unfamiliar accounts, each one strategically placed to trace back to her. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't sloppy fraud. Whoever had done this had gone to extreme lengths to ensure there was no escape for her. She closed her eyes and forced herself to remember every detail she could. $3 million didn't just disappear. Someone had designed this, calculated every move, erased every loose end, and pinned it all on her. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she focused on the one name that didn't belong in any of the records she had ever seen before: Thompson Enterprises. She had managed the charity's finances for years, scrutinized every budget, every transaction, every donation with painstaking detail. If that company had ever been involved in any of their financial dealings, she would have known. But she had never heard of it, not in meetings, not in contracts, not even in casual conversations. It had appeared out of nowhere, its name suddenly linked to a transfer that had ruined her life. This was not a coincidence. This was a targeted attack, a carefully orchestrated setup with one goal: to destroy her. But why? Maya swallowed hard, feeling a sense of suffocating isolation settle over her. The world outside had already made up its mind about her. The press, the public, even the people she had once trusted had turned their backs. She had seen it in their eyes in the courtroom. They didn't care about the truth. They had already decided she was guilty before she had even opened her mouth. She gritted her teeth, trying to suppress the wave of anger and helplessness rising inside her. If she didn't fight back, this would be the end of everything. But she was trapped, locked away in a cell, stripped of resources, cut off from the very information she needed to clear her name. She couldn't access financial records, couldn't investigate, couldn't prove anything. And she knew Mitchell, Harper, and whoever was really pulling the strings would make sure she never got the chance to. If she wanted justice, she needed help. She needed someone on the outside, someone who still believed in her, someone willing to dig through the dirt to challenge the system that had already condemned her. When the cell door creaked open, a police officer motioned for her to stand. The trial resumes. Let's go. Maya took a deep breath, forcing herself to suppress the fury boiling inside her. She stepped out, wrists bound in cold steel, and walked through the frigid, sterile hallway of the police station. As the courtroom door swung open, every gaze snapped to her. Cameras flashed relentlessly. The jury watched her in silence, and prosecutor Laura Mitchell maintained her razor-sharp expression, waiting, it seemed, for the perfect moment to strike. Maya sat in the defendant's chair, but this time she didn't feel the same crushing despair as before. The pieces in her mind were beginning to align, and she realized one thing with absolute certainty. If they wanted to push her to the edge, she wasn't going to make it easy for them. Maya sat silently in the defendant's chair, her fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her nails nearly dug into her skin. Around her, murmurs and whispers rippled through the courtroom. Spectators, jurors, even the legal teams. Everything seemed to be closing in on her, tightening like a noose, pushing her into a dark corner with no escape. Prosecutor Laura Mitchell was still going, her voice dripping with sarcasm and venom as she meticulously dissected the financial statements, emphasizing every detail with rhetorical precision. Judge Harper sat high above, her cold gaze overseeing everything like a puppeteer who already knew how this play would end. A fire ignited inside Maya, hot, raging, and uncontrollable. They had pushed her to her breaking point. They wanted to destroy her, to bury her under the filth of a crime she had never committed. But they had underestimated her. Before Mitchell could finish her self-indulgent monologue, Maya shot up from her seat, her voice ringing through the tense courtroom like a gunshot. "I am the daughter of Mayor Robert Thompson." The courtroom exploded. For a single moment, dead silence hung in the air. Then a tidal wave of chaos crashed through the room. Reporters shouted over one another. Cameras flashed incessantly. Jurors exchanged stunned glances, and the audience gasped in disbelief. A few people leapt to their feet as if trying to confirm whether they had heard correctly. Mitchell stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. Judge Harper arched a brow, momentarily taken aback, though she quickly masked her reaction. She slammed the gavel down, but this time the sound was powerless against the roaring pandemonium. "Order! Order in the courtroom!" Harper's voice sliced through the noise like a blade, sharp and commanding, but even as the gavel struck again and again, the uproar refused to die down. Mitchell, regaining her composure, narrowed her eyes, though the shock still lingered on her face. "What did you just say, defendant?" she hissed, her voice no longer carrying the absolute confidence it once did. "Would you care to repeat that?" Maya inhaled deeply, scanning the room, ensuring every single person was listening. She had nothing left to lose. If she wanted to survive this, she had to take control right now. "I am the daughter of Mayor Robert Thompson." No one dared to breathe. Even Harper, who had maintained her detached demeanor throughout the trial, sat eerily still. A single unspoken question lingered in the heavy air. If Maya was the mayor's daughter, then why was she on trial? And more importantly, if Mayor Thompson was connected to this case, was this truly just a financial scandal, or was it part of something much, much bigger? Maya locked eyes with Mitchell, her gaze burning with defiance. For the first time since this trial began, the balance of power had shifted, and this time, she wasn't going to let them manipulate her any longer. The buzz in the courtroom hadn't died down after Maya revealed her identity. The mayor's daughter, that still hung in the air, causing everyone present to stare at her, unable to look away. Why did she wait until now to say this? Why would someone of her stature be treated like an ordinary criminal? This question echoed not only in the minds of the spectators, but also in the jury's thoughts, who had been almost certain of Maya's guilt until this moment and now began to waver. Prosecutor Laura Mitchell gritted her teeth, trying to regain control. "Miss Johnson, your statements have nothing to do with this case. Your identity does not change the fact that $3 million were embezzled from the charity you manage." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the heat spread across her chest. This was her only chance to make people question what was really going on. She couldn't let Mitchell steer the case in the direction they had already set. She turned, facing the jury directly, her voice firm yet filled with restrained anger. "Why am I being accused? That is the question I want everyone in this room to ask themselves. A woman who has dedicated her life to charity, who has no history of financial misconduct, suddenly becomes a criminal overnight." The courtroom fell silent. Maya continued, this time her voice stronger. $3 million didn't just disappear by accident. It was transferred to a company named Thompson Enterprises. Do any of you see an odd coincidence here? Mitchell opened her mouth to object, but Maya didn't give her a chance. She turned to face Judge Harper, who had been watching her with sharp eyes the entire time. "Your Honor, I have the right to request a full investigation into Thompson Enterprises, the company that received the missing funds. If the authorities truly want to find the mastermind behind this, they should start there." A new wave of murmurs spread throughout the room. This time, they weren't directed at her, but filled with doubt. Why would a company bearing the mayor's name appear in a case of embezzlement? Maya could see Mitchell freeze, her fingers clutching the papers in front of her, trying to maintain composure. Meanwhile, Harper squinted, her hands tightening as if weighing something. Maya didn't know what she was thinking, but at least she had succeeded in planting the seed of doubt in everyone's mind. Maya stared directly at Mitchell, a cold smile forming on her lips. "If you truly want to find the person responsible, maybe I'm not the only one who should be sitting here today." There was no doubt now. She was just a pawn in a much larger political game. And if they thought she would meekly accept her role as the victim in this game, they had underestimated her. Inspector Lisa Ramirez sat in her small office, the light from her desk lamp casting a glow over the scattered piles of paperwork in front of her. As one of the most experienced inspectors in Springfield, she had witnessed countless cases of corruption and financial fraud, but there was something about Maya Johnson's case that she couldn't ignore. Her instincts told her that everything wasn't as simple as it appeared in court. She had been following the case from day one, and the more she dug, the more she found too many inconsistencies. A huge sum of money had disappeared, the evidence surfaced too quickly, and most troubling of all was the involvement of Thompson Enterprises, a shell company with no prior legitimate operations. Ramirez took a sip of her coffee, her eyes still fixed on the computer screen where she was reviewing financial transactions related to the case. She quickly realized that the funds weren't just transferred to a single account. They had been broken down into smaller transactions, which were then funneled into secret accounts linked to a series of subsidiary companies. Every time she traced a transaction, it led her to a new company, but all of them had one thing in common. They were all connected to the Springfield city government. She stopped when she saw a familiar name, Thompson Enterprises. That was the company Maya had mentioned in court. But what shocked Ramirez even more were the shady financial contracts this company had with local government agencies. Payments amounting to millions of dollars had been funneled into the company with no legitimate reason. She expanded her investigation and discovered that over the past 3 years, this company had received dozens of contracts from the city without going through public bidding. This meant that someone within the government was using Thompson Enterprises as a front for money laundering. The deeper she dug, the more uncomfortable Ramirez became. She had seen this kind of manipulation before, a covert power network where the rich and influential manipulated the system for their own gain. But this time, things seemed even more complicated. Someone had deliberately engineered Maya's scandal to distract the public from a much larger conspiracy. If her suspicions were correct, the mastermind behind it wasn't just out to ruin Maya. They were trying to cover up a massive corruption scheme. Ramirez leaned back in her chair, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard as she sent a request for an internal investigation into Thompson Enterprises. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she couldn't stand by and watch an innocent person be destroyed by a corrupt system. She picked up the phone and called someone she knew could help her dig deeper into this case. "I need a meeting urgently. There's something big going on." Inspector Lisa Ramirez didn't waste any time tracing the trail leading to Prosecutor Laura Mitchell. As she reviewed the contracts related to Thompson Enterprises, a suspicious pattern began to emerge. Several financial transactions had been conducted through subsidiary companies directly tied to Mitchell's office. This meant that Mitchell was not only unfairly prosecuting Maya, but could also be a part of the corruption scheme being hidden. Ramirez dug deeper and discovered that Mitchell had received questionable payments from Mayor Robert Thompson's front companies that had been awarded government contracts without public bidding. Realizing the gravity of this discovery, Ramirez didn't hesitate. She gathered all the evidence and sent a detailed report to some of Springfield's top investigative journalists. A series of explosive articles erupted across major newspapers, exposing the suspicious connections between Mitchell and the money laundering corporations tied to the city government. The news spread like wildfire. Mitchell's image flooded the front pages, from photos of her with senior officials to undeniable banking transaction evidence. Under increasing pressure from the media, Mitchell called a press conference, but instead of refuting the accusations, she was bombarded with relentless questions from reporters, unable to offer a reasonable explanation. Public outrage erupted as the first articles were published. The people of Springfield, who had once believed that justice had been served when Maya was prosecuted, now realized that they had been deceived. Protests erupted across the city, with people marching in the streets holding signs that read "Justice for Maya" and "Prosecute the real criminals." The media continued to report nonstop, and television channels hosted heated debates about the level of corruption within Springfield's government. The entire political system of the city began to tremble as public pressure mounted. City Hall was surrounded by hundreds of protesters demanding an independent investigation into the entire financial system of the city and Mayor Thompson's role in the matter. Riot police were deployed but couldn't quash the rising wave of anger flooding Springfield. Meanwhile, the jury started to question the entire case against Maya, and for the first time, some members of the panel voiced that they needed to reconsider all the evidence before reaching a verdict. Step by step, those who had pushed Maya to the darkest path of her life were beginning to be brought to light. But this was just the beginning. The mastermind behind the entire network still hadn't fully revealed themselves, and Maya knew that if she wanted to regain her freedom, she had to expose the true mastermind before they could erase all traces. The media storm had barely settled when another shocking revelation rocked Springfield's government. Leaked financial records, sent by an anonymous source, exposed a staggering truth. Mayor Robert Thompson had been using Maya's charity fund as a money laundering tool for years. What had appeared to be legitimate, well-intentioned transactions between the city government and charitable organizations turned out to be nothing more than a facade for an underground financial network. The money, seemingly flowing to a good cause, was funneled through various accounts before disappearing into Thompson's shadowy front companies. A wave of undeniable evidence was released to the public, from internal emails to bank statements showing large sums of money being moved in increasingly sophisticated ways. Springfield citizens were outraged. The man who had once been hailed as a compassionate, dedicated leader now exposed himself as a deeply corrupt and immoral figure. The protests escalated, with crowds swelling in size, demanding that he resign immediately. City Hall was soon surrounded by thousands of protesters carrying signs that read, "Justice for Maya" and "End the corruption." The calls for justice grew louder, and the police had no choice but to launch an official investigation into the mayor's dealings. When the search warrant for the mayor's office was executed, a series of destroyed documents and financial records that had been hastily burned were uncovered, further cementing the evidence of an elaborate and systemic corruption plan. Robert Thompson had nowhere to run. But the shock wave didn't stop there. As the city began to process the truth behind the mayor's scandal, another explosive set of internal court documents was leaked, sending a fresh wave of disbelief through Springfield. These files revealed that Judge Evelyn Harper had been bribed by the city government to ensure Maya's conviction. Just days before Maya's trial, suspicious payments linked to Thompson Enterprises had been funneled into Harper's personal accounts. It became clear that the judge had deliberately manipulated the trial, stripping Maya of her legal rights and turning her into a pawn sacrifice to protect the corrupt network that had been pulling the strings from the shadows. As this news broke, Harper was summoned immediately. The mounting pressure from both the public and the judicial community was too much for her to handle. She had no choice but to resign in disgrace, her career and reputation crumbling in an instant. The day she left the courthouse, the very people who had once regarded her with respect and admiration turned their backs on her. Her colleagues refused to meet her gaze. The reporters swarmed, capturing every moment of her downfall. A woman who had once been seen as a symbol of integrity and justice was now stripped of all her honor, becoming the very embodiment of the rot within the legal system she had once vowed to uphold. The sequence of falls from grace by the powerful figures who had been at the pinnacle of the city's political and legal systems sent a shock wave through Springfield that reverberated across the nation. This was unprecedented. The citizens of Springfield had watched as their trust in the system was shattered piece by piece, until nothing was left of the leadership they had once revered. But for Maya, this was still not the end. The battle for justice had only just begun. She had been thrust into the role of a sacrificial pawn in a deadly game of power and influence. Those who had manipulated her, ruined her life, and used her as a scapegoat were still out there, pulling the strings behind the scenes. And now, Maya knew that in order to truly gain her freedom and reclaim her dignity, she would have to expose the true mastermind behind it all before they could erase every last trace of their involvement. With every layer of corruption being peeled away, Maya felt the weight of the truth bearing down on her. The storm had just begun. As the revelations piled up and the people's fury intensified, Maya's resolve solidified. No longer would she allow herself to be a pawn in someone else's game. Now she would be the one who called the shots, and she would make sure that those who had wronged her, those who had corrupted the very institutions meant to protect and serve the people, would pay for their actions, no matter the cost. The battle for justice was not over, and Maya's fight for redemption was just beginning. The reversal trial took place in a completely different atmosphere than Maya's original trial. This time, those who had once manipulated justice, the ones who had pushed her into the depths of humiliation, were the ones now sitting in the defendant's seat. Mayor Robert Thompson, Prosecutor Laura Mitchell, and former Judge Evelyn Harper. The very individuals who had wielded absolute power over Springfield were now facing the consequences of their actions, forced to answer for their crimes. It was a scene that many never thought they would witness. The corrupt had become the accused. The courtroom was packed, and outside, hundreds of people gathered, holding signs demanding justice. The air was filled with chants of anger, defiance, and calls for accountability. It was as though the entire city of Springfield had turned its attention to this trial because they knew it wasn't just about Maya's vindication. It was about exposing the rot at the heart of their political system. This trial would be a reckoning, not only for 3 corrupt individuals, but for an entire system that had been broken for years. The evidence presented against them was incontrovertible, irrefutable, and damning. Mayor Robert Thompson was accused of a long list of crimes, including money laundering, embezzling public funds, abuse of power, and orchestrating a network of corruption. The complex web of financial dealings between him and Thompson Enterprises was laid bare for all to see. The sheer scale of the corruption was staggering, and the details painted a chilling portrait of how he had used his position to funnel millions into his pocket, all while deceiving the very people he was supposed to serve. His years of deceit were exposed, his grip on power slowly disintegrating in the face of truth. Laura Mitchell, the prosecutor who had once relentlessly pursued Maya, was now facing charges of enabling the very corruption she had sworn to fight. Leaked emails revealed that Mitchell had been taking direct orders from the mayor's office to ensure that Maya was convicted, turning the initial trial into nothing more than a scripted farce. She had knowingly distorted the facts, manipulated the law, and fabricated evidence to ruin Maya's life. The woman who had once been regarded as a sharp and fearless prosecutor was now exposed as a puppet in the hands of a corrupt system, her reputation shattered beyond repair. And then there was former Judge Evelyn Harper, the woman who had once sat with an air of authority, handing down judgment in the courtroom, now facing accusations of bribery and abuse of power. The very judge who had presided over Maya's trial, who had been the key figure in condemning her, was now being judged for her own egregious misconduct. The leaked financial records showed that Harper had accepted bribes from Thompson Enterprises just days before Maya's trial, ensuring that the case would go according to a predetermined script. She had been an active participant in the conspiracy to railroad Maya, stripping her of her rights and sentencing her to a fate she didn't deserve. As Harper sat in the defendant's chair, her face was a mask of shame, her eyes never daring to meet the gaze of the jury. Once revered as a pillar of justice, she now embodied everything that had gone wrong in the system. The moment was bitterly ironic. The symbol of justice now sitting in the dock, facing the consequences of her own betrayal. Maya, meanwhile, sat in the front row of the courtroom. For the first time since her life had been turned upside down, she didn't feel like a victim. She wasn't the one being accused. She wasn't the one subjected to public ridicule. This time, she was the one standing tall. She was no longer the one in the defendant's chair. Now she was the one standing up and telling the truth. She was the one who had managed to expose the corruption and manipulation. When the time came for her to take the witness stand, she stood up, her heart pounding, but her stride unwavering. There was no hint of hesitation in her voice as she addressed the court, her words filled with power and conviction. "They tried to destroy my life," she said, her voice steady and firm as she looked across at the faces of those who had wronged her. "But today, I stand here to show that justice cannot be manipulated by power or money." As her words echoed through the courtroom, the jury didn't take long to reach their verdict. The air was thick with anticipation. Every eye in the courtroom was on them. It felt like the world had come to a standstill. When the verdicts were read, all three defendants were found guilty on all charges. Mayor Thompson was sentenced to 25 years in prison, a sentence that ensured he would never again be able to manipulate the city for his own gain. It was a heavy blow to the political machine he had built, one that would send a clear message to anyone who sought to follow in his footsteps. Laura Mitchell was disbarred and sentenced to 15 years in prison, her career as a prosecutor destroyed. The woman who had once been a symbol of legal prowess was now reduced to a criminal, her reputation in tatters, her life unraveling before her. Evelyn Harper was stripped of her judicial title, sentenced to 10 years behind bars, and permanently discredited in the eyes of the legal community. Her fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. Once a figure of authority, she was now just another criminal, her actions forever tarnishing the once proud judicial system. As the defendants were escorted from the courtroom, the crowd outside erupted in deafening cheers. For the first time in years, the people of Springfield felt that justice had truly been served. It was a cathartic moment, a feeling of triumph that reverberated through the city. The corrupt had been held accountable, and the power of the people had prevailed. But for Maya, this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. As she walked out of the courthouse, reporters crowded around her, firing off questions about how she felt now that she had been exonerated. Maya smiled, but inside, her mind was already working on her next move. She wasn't satisfied with just clearing her name. This was about something much bigger. She wanted to change the system that had nearly destroyed her. She had seen firsthand how power and corruption had permeated every level of the system, and she knew that in order to truly achieve justice, she couldn't stop here. There were still too many corrupt people in power, still too many institutions built on lies and deceit. Maya was determined to bring them all down, one by one, until the entire corrupt system had been exposed for what it truly was. And she would be the one to lead the charge. The fight for justice was far from over. After the historic trial, Maya Johnson was no longer just the woman wronged by a broken judicial system. She became a symbol of justice and relentless resistance against corruption. Her story spread across the nation, becoming a hot topic on news broadcasts, political forums, and legal discussions. The image of Maya, once a falsely accused defendant humiliated in a courtroom, now stood strong, resolute, and determined to change the very system that had pushed her to the brink. But Maya didn't stop at exonerating herself. She knew that if this system could do this to her, it could do it to anyone. She used her newfound fame to call for a comprehensive overhaul of Springfield's legal system, from prosecution processes and trials to government transparency. With the strong support of the public and non-governmental organizations, Maya became the leader of a movement demanding real change in how justice was carried out. Under the pressure of the movement she had sparked, the government was forced to take action. New laws were passed, implementing strict oversight of prosecutors and judges to prevent abuse of power. Judicial reforms were established to protect the innocent from biased trials, ensuring that no one would ever be wrongfully convicted for political gain. The judicial system was also reformed to prevent cases like Maya's, where a person was brought to trial without enough time or resources to defend themselves properly. In the newspapers, Maya Johnson's name was no longer associated with terms like defendant or criminal. Instead, she was now referred to as an activist, a warrior against injustice, a woman who turned her pain into a driving force to protect others. Legal reform seminars, TV interviews, inspiring speeches. Maya was everywhere. And every time she spoke, she not only shared her story but also became the voice for thousands of others who had been trampled by the system. A year after the historic trial closed, the city of Springfield was no longer the same. The storms of protests, the shocking investigations, and the verdicts handed down to those who had manipulated the system had left an indelible mark in the minds of the people. For the first time in decades, the public felt that justice was no longer a distant concept, but something they could reclaim with their own voices and actions. Springfield City Hall, once a symbol of decay and corruption, now stood as the venue for a pivotal event. Thousands had gathered, filling the central square to the brim, their eyes fixed on the grand stage where a woman was preparing to step up to the podium. They had waited for this moment for so long, ever since the name Maya Johnson became a symbol of relentless struggle against injustice. Maya stepped onto the podium, her eyes scanning the sea of faces before her. She was no longer the woman humiliated in that courtroom. She was now a warrior, someone who had risen from the darkness to expose the wrongs and change the system with her own hands. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the solemn silence from the thousands waiting for her to speak. And then she said, "Justice does not exist by default. We must fight to claim it." The entire square erupted in deafening applause. Those words were not just a declaration. They were a rallying cry. They were not just for Springfield, but for all those who had been crushed by the system, for all those who had felt their voices were meaningless. Maya knew that this battle was not over. She had reclaimed her honor, but there were still thousands out there trapped in the whirlwinds of injustice, still wrongfully accused, still trampled by those in power. Justice was not just about clearing one person's name. It was an ongoing battle to ensure that such mistakes would never be repeated. The story of Maya Johnson is not just a personal journey, but a lesson for all of us about the power of persistence and justice. In life, there will be times when you are pushed into despair, misunderstood, and crushed by forces greater than you could ever imagine. But always remember that the truth has value, and justice can only be reclaimed if we have the courage to stand up and fight for it. When facing injustice, don't remain silent. Silence never changes the world. Only action and determination can do that. If you've ever been trampled upon, remember that you are not a victim, but a person with the right to demand justice for yourself. If you are inspired by stories with unexpected twists, moral challenges, and the impact of kindness, please support us by liking or subscribing to Emotional Journey. We put our heart and soul into each story, and it really means a lot to have you come along for the ride. Thank you for being a part of this journey.